Welcome to Brick by Brick, a podcast produced by Move Your Mind, committed to changing the construction industry, one conversation at a time. There are endless issues surrounding mental health in companies. When comparing industry rates of mental illness, the construction industry sticks out like a sore thumb. 77% of employees say they've experienced burnout in their current job. At best, mental health issues lead to more sick days and reduced company productivity. At worst, it can lead to an increased risk of suicide, with the construction industry having a suicide rate 4.5 times higher than the general public. This needs to change. I'm really excited to share with you our first construction industry forum with Angelina Pillai, who's the Chief Executive Officer at the Association of Consulting Architects, John Toomey, who's the founder of Wide Awake Wellness, Lisa Davie, who's a project engineer at Lendlease, and Martin Smith, who's the Group General Manager of Health, Sustainability and Climate at John Holland. We discussed a number of issues such as the state of mental health in the construction industry, impacts of COVID, and the ongoing challenge of improving mental health and well-being in the industry. And finally, a huge thank you to Lendlease for sponsoring this podcast. I hope you enjoy. First of all, just want to say thank you to all of you guys for making the time to have this chat. This is really just an extension of the Brick by Brick podcast that we've been running for about 3 or 4 months now, and that came on the back of the Move Your Mind podcast. And as Martin and Angelina, you've both been on the construction podcast, and we've just had such a great reaction from it. And I think, as you guys know more than me, it's just such a big issue in society, but something that is being talked about more in construction, and obviously needs to be addressed. And we've been overwhelmed by how many people have been reaching out and hearing these messages. So again, really appreciate you all making the time. I might just go around and ask each of you to just do a quick introduction on what company you're coming from, and a bit of quick overview of your background. So maybe Martin, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So Martin Smith. I work for the John Holland Group, and I lead the what's called the Health, Sustainability and Climate function for John Holland. So which covers health and safety, environment, well-being, corporate social responsibility and climate action. So quite a very interesting portfolio in a construction infrastructure sense. I've been in the company now for 5 years, just over 5 years. I've been in the industry for probably 20 plus years. Worked for most of the tier one contractors, except for Lendlease and a few others. Really enjoy the industry, and particularly this topic. It's becoming more and increasingly more important over time. So it's an area that particularly interests me. I have a background prior to getting into construction. I did work in the human services sector for a period of time as a social worker. So I've always had a particular interest in mental health and the various manifestations of it. So in the context of construction, it's obviously a significant issue for us, and a bit of a wicked problem.
I appreciate that, Martin. And I've worked closely with you, or been in touch for quite a while, and seen firsthand what you're doing, and you really are making a huge mark in that industry. So a lot of
thanks.
We've just had John jump in. John, can you hear us okay?
Yes, my sincere apologies. I didn't have the link. I was trying to join as a viewer. Yes.
Oh, so, there you go. Apologies from our end, mate.
Yeah, that's
good. Good. Well, we're glad you came in, and we're keeping this pretty casual. So I've just sort of We're just actually going around and doing a quick introduction, getting everyone to introduce themselves and talk about, the work they're doing and, what company they're representing, etc. So seeing that you've just jumped on, John, I might hand it over to you just to, introduce yourself.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nick. Hi, everybody. John Toomey. My company is Wide Awake Wellness, and we provide.
Oh,
hang on. I've got feedback from the broadcast. Okay. Now
I had that same problem happen. I had to close that down. Yep.
Yeah, gotcha. So John Toomey here from Wide Awake Wellness, and I provide education services in workplaces in a number of areas. And at the moment, my focus around the workplace, the mental well-being, is around prevention, sort of skilling people up to relearn the skills that they need to sort of keep themselves out of the dark cellar of mental health issues. So it's a pretty interesting time because there's a lot of focus on supporting people once they've got mental health issues. But I'm more interested in, and whilst that's important, I'm more interested in prevention.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. Lisa, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yep. So I'm a senior project engineer for Lendlease. Unlike Martin, Lendlease is the only company I've worked for in my professional life. I've been with Lendlease for 10 years now. So started just at Monash Uni, building a new engineering complex there, and then I've been in the sort of hospital sector ever since, running the various trades, hands-on on-site with structures through fit-out. So yeah, I'm more of a hands-on on the ground. Don't sort of particularly have any well-being expertise as Martin and John might, but I guess now my last role started being in a managerial position, so start to take on that responsibility of looking after those that are working for you as well as yourself. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Well, appreciate you making the time to come on. And Angelina, if you want to just give an introduction as well.
Sure, thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. Angelina Pillai. I am here from the Association of Consulting Architects. We're a peak employer body for architectural practices here in Australia. We've got about 850 firms as members. Industrial relations sits at the core of our charter. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but trust me, it is. As a result of, being responsible for IR, equally critically, our role has kind of expanded to supporting practices with the business side of architecture, so not design but the business, and that's through the development of tools and resources, advice, advocacy, and having important conversations like the ones we're having today. We're really committed to the well-being and the culture of the architecture profession. That's something we've taken on quite actively over the last few years, with a focus on equitable practice as a lever to outcomes of profitable businesses, productive businesses, and sustainable business. So that's really where I'm coming from in terms of being at the ACA. I've been here almost 5 years. I come from a membership body background, so represented a number of professions such as HR, procurement, supply chain, the general practitioners. So that's been quite varied, but fundamentally it's about servicing professions and the well-being of professions in general.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, we might jump in. So I'm just going to read out. I've got just a couple of statistics here. So, it's pretty shocking. Construction workers are 6 times more likely to die from suicide than an accident at work. More than 20% of the industry is shown to have a mental health condition. And it's an industry that employs 10% of the population. So we're talking about, a really large number. So I might direct this question to Martin and John, working directly in the industry. How big of an issue, first of all, is mental health in this industry? For one of you, maybe Martin, if you want to go first.
Okay, fine. Thanks, Nick. Look, it is. It's endemic. I think it's those statistics are very shocking, and I think the publication of those statistics over time have been a real wake-up call. for the industry. I think the industry has always recognised, certainly in the last 10 years, that there's a problem. But it didn't get discussed, and it wasn't openly discussed. I think now that there's plenty of research into how widespread this issue is, that there's a body of work that's been published that clearly sets out the underlying issues that are driving poor mental health outcomes. And I think that the industry's really kind of mobilised in the last 5 or 6 years to try and address this. And no doubt we'll talk at some stage, Nick, about what the industry is doing in response to those confronting numbers. But as we were discussing earlier, prevention has to be the approach that needs to be taken to deal with the underlying drivers of poor mental health outcomes, rather than wellbeing programs that really don't cut through to those issues that need to change.
Yeah, thank you for that. And absolutely, I think straight after this, actually, we'll jump into that, looking at what actually is being done. Before that, John, what's your view on mental health in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's it is so significant, and speaking to safety managers and other managers all the time, and they're lamenting the fact that they've got guys who are struggling on their sites. I was first sort of stimulated to write the book that I wrote on FIFO because of the number of suicides that were occurring in FIFO work sites, and people really struggling and getting themselves into trouble. And it's the problem is huge, because we look at the number of suicides or the number of people who are suffering from mental illness. Then you've got to look at the ripple effect of their families and everybody else who's involved in that. So you talk about 10% of the population. What percentage of the population does this industry actually impact? And so it is significant. But as Martin said, I can feel that the industry collectively has taken a turn to want to deal with this, and that's an important step.
Absolutely, and I think that's such a good point, because 10% of the working population is a huge number, but that's not focusing on that ripple effect of their families, friends, how many people, how much residual impact there is from all of these issues. So it really it affects so many people, and I think it's a huge opportunity in this industry to be able to through talking about this, through having, as Martin was saying, taking preventative action, there's a huge impact that can be made on broader society by doing it. So it's a really big opportunity. It's something we need to address. So I'll get to Angelina and Lisa in a second. Just continuing on this topic, Martin, what are some of the things that are being done to make some of these changes, I guess, in your organisation, at John Holland, and I guess more broadly as well?
Yeah, look, I think probably the most important things that are being done now that haven't been tackled in the past are those issues which are much more difficult to change, and this goes to the culture of the industry. It goes to what characterises the industry. And what I mean by that is, the construction industry has a certain dynamic to it, and certain characteristics such as long working hours, long working weeks. It's generally known as an industry that's not particularly family friendly, or relationship friendly. It's got, some stigma attached to it around the work hard, play hard culture, which is, thankfully, that's turning now. But it's addressing those cultural issues, as we appreciate, can take years to do. It's also about our clients' expectations in terms of program delivery. The industry is expected to deliver large projects in shorter time frames with skinnier margins, and that puts a lot of stress into the industry. The industry is asked generally, sometimes, not in all cases, to submit tenders very close to Christmas. Sometimes our teams work through Christmas in order to meet those deadlines. So there's a lot of pressure in the industry that creates these poor mental health outcomes for those people that operate in it. And they're the issues that we need to tackle, and they're the issues that are being tackled collaboratively through industry associations like the Australian Constructors Association, who have established a task force for culture change, construction industry task force, to deal with that issue, but it requires complete collaboration between all the construction companies in Australia in order to do that, because it's such a highly competitive environment we operate in. Sometimes addressing these things can have commercial impacts, and unless every company is involved in this, it creates a perception of disadvantage, commercial disadvantage. So there's a recognition that like we did with safety 15 years ago, that safety is not considered competitive advantage, and there should be open sharing of experiences and standards and lessons, etc. So that same approach is being taken in the area of wellbeing and mental health. So thankfully, that issue is gradually being resolved. So tackling, the diversity issue in the industry and making it more attractive for more diverse members of the community to join, for people to select engineering and construction-related careers for university is really important. So it's about changing the makeup of the industry. Moving to a 5-day working week has been a shift that's gradually gaining momentum. Working with clients to get more realistic expectations established on contractors that are bidding for work and delivering work. That's really important. So they're the things that we talk about in terms of the cultural factors that need to be, the structural issues that are driving poor mental health outcomes. What we're doing inside John Holland is, apart from participating in those discussions and in some cases leading those discussions, we're also doing what we can do to address those issues. So, looking at how we can build more diversity into the business, having more female representation right throughout the business, from projects right through to senior management. We're codifying wellbeing requirements in our project plans now. So rather than retrofitting wellbeing as an afterthought in project delivery, we're actually including those in the bids. Our pre-contracts people are making provision in the bids for wellbeing programs to be funded and resourced on a project. So we have wellbeing plans for all of our projects, and in some cases we have wellbeing coordinators, depending upon the size and the complexity of the project as well. And then we've got them. We have the normal things that you would expect a company to have in terms of the services and offerings for the organisation. We also spend a lot of time building capability in our leadership around how mental health turns up in our teams, and then as a leader, what do you need to do in order to foster wellbeing in your team? So we've got a collaboration with the Black Dog Institute, and they provide all our leadership training, and everybody that has any leadership responsibilities, people leadership responsibilities, has to do the mandatory training. So they're just a few things that we're doing, Nick, inside the organisation. But I think more importantly, it's what we're doing to contribute to the discussion to change the culture of the industry that's going to be more sustainable for the industry in terms of mental health.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I think it really is amazing to see what John Holland is doing, is becoming a huge leader in this industry, and that's what I noticed early on when I was speaking to you. It was always about not just the organisation, but about what can actually be done to make that change more broadly. And I think it's just so great that showing that leadership and helping people. So we might jump to Lisa from Lendlease here. So Lendlease are also doing a lot when it comes to mental health and wellbeing. What's your experience being in that organisation? Have you seen a change? How are you finding that mental health conversation?
Yeah, I've definitely seen a change across the 10 years. I guess there's a few different levels to it. The first is sort of how much it gets spoken about by our leadership team. Like our regional business unit has an ops team, and how much it gets brought up in their conversations. I attend the senior leadership EH&S meeting that we have quarterly, and it gets discussed there as part of the safety of our sites, is the well-being of our people. So I think that's important to start off with. But then once you get to a site level, 10 years ago, we'd have sort of safety talks with the whole site, and it would be about, how are we managing fall from heights? We're leading into the Christmas break. Make sure you're paying attention with what you're doing, just to sort of drive home those safety standards while we're all here on site. So it is quite a high-risk industry. But now that's developed, especially in the recent years, to also have a focus on mental health, and sometimes we'll have it as a separate toolbox with the whole site to discuss mental health for the individuals, what services are out there and what's available. I was part of the Pathways to 144 Beds project, which is across 4 sites in Melbourne, developing and building another 144 mental health beds, which was off the back of COVID. And that we actually had mental health staff who were going to use the facility come and speak to the group about what the facility will mean and what it's going to provide to the community, and then just talking about mental health in general. And I think that had a real impact on the workers themselves. It helps to understand what we're doing in the industry, but also to understand mental health overall, so they know what's available for them, what's out there. It just helps start those conversations when you're around. Sort of, it makes it a little bit more normal to talk about how you're feeling, or if something's not going well, or even if it's just sort of water cooler chat. But it builds it in, and it builds up the confidence to then, if you do have something bigger going on or you need some extra help, it's already started to be part of the norm. And then the third element is our project sites. So our Lendlease site teams, I think I've been pretty lucky with the management that I've had, and they're really engaged in the people and understanding who everyone is and what's important to them, and being able to set up frameworks for what might be important to you. So whether that's my construction manager leaving early so he can pick up his kids a couple of days a week, it just sets that tone in the office, and it helps people to be comfortable with who they are, and then to also be able to put forward and prioritise something that might be important to them, and work together to make that work with our busy schedules.
Thank you so much for that. And I love all the points you're talking about there. And I think it's a really important one, what you're saying about just starting those conversations in the organisation, gradually, chipping away at just changing that culture. And I always talk about how the culture in organisation, really, it's a microcosm of broader society, and sometimes these cultures have been built over many, many years. So it takes a long time to break it down. And I think it really takes, those little baby steps, and everyone sort of becoming their own leader and just being part of that conversation. And if we all can do that, that's how we really do start to make these changes. So I think that's a really, really great point there. Angelina, what are, in the work you're doing, what are you seeing when it comes to mental health in the workplace?
Oh, we're seeing a lot, and I wish I could add something more spectacular to all the contributions from Martin, John, and Lisa. But, Nick, reflecting on a conversation you and I had when we first did this, and I talked about, and again, I'm representing the architecture profession, so in practice, a lot of students of architecture and graduates that I talk about refer to architecture as archi-torture, and the ripple effects of that permeating their well-being, which is devastating. And we've known for this for the longest time. We've known of this for the longest time in the profession, but now we have this national research project, first of its kind, the well-being of architects, which is actually validating all of these, the seriousness of well-being across across the profession. And this is born, from a range of issues, most notably due to the nature of the industry itself. Now, construction is very fragmented. It lacks that serious coordination across multiple players. Architecture is one of those players within the industry. So things like, and John or Martin, I think you talked about this before, things like time management pressures, the deadlines, timelines, overtime, these are all contributing factors to well-being. And then there's that issue around financial management, so fees, procurement processes, or really dysfunctional procurement processes around complex projects, the tendering processes, which are quite problematic. So again, the research is telling us that these are issues. So from ACA's perspective, the association's perspective, we're looking at where the gaps are and working with our partners to develop tools and resources to overcome these issues. Training, education capability is a big deal for us in the profession too. About 2 years ago, the ACA launched the Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum across the country. This was modelled on the UK version of it. And all it is about peers and practices coming together and sharing their experiences about what's working, what's not working on certain topics that we've identified as key issues within the profession. So things like the overtime culture, clients are a big deal, deadlines, the physical office environment, and how do we care for our people, students, interns, and then the broader profession itself. And that's been proving to be quite popular. We've just also launched our webinar series based on those toolkit topics. So we're bringing together, a bit like this forum today, practices that are doing some really great stuff in addressing these issues. We're also partnering with organisations such as Champions of Change around the gender piece. And I just wanted to kind of also highlight what I'm seeing in terms of some of the inconsistencies around how we're approaching it. One of that is around the gender piece, which has a link to mental well-being. Gender equity or the lack of gender equity has an intrinsic link to well-being issues with women, not necessarily feeling safe or feeling equal in terms of flexibility. And we know that construction is also quite guilty of this in terms of equal participation of women. So, we're working hard with organisations such as the National Association of Women in Construction to kind of address these issues, and another organisation in architecture, Parlour, that's doing some amazing work in just raising the awareness of it, but looking at ways in which organisations and the profession can come together on things like, parental leave, flexibility, sexual harassment, bullying, and talking about this in the context of policies being implemented. So, change can occur. It's going to take a long time. We're still not there yet. We have a long way ahead of us. But I think talking about it is the first step. And listening to, some of the fabulous initiatives that are being implemented just today, I think is, we're all heading in that right direction.
Lendlease is proudly sponsoring the Brick by Brick podcast. They're committed to the health and safety of their people and those they work with, and have been acknowledged externally for their focus on providing healthy workplaces. Lendlease is certified as a globally healthy workplace in recognition of their focus on employee health and well-being. In addition, Lendlease won the multinational employer category at the 6th Global Healthy Workplace Awards. They have a holistic approach to health and well-being and continue to grow their focus around mental health. Lendlease genuinely care and are out there not just to make a difference in their organisation, but in construction and society as a whole. We're very proud to have Lendlease as a sponsor of the Brick by Brick podcast. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I think there's no end point to this, and we're probably never going to be able to fully get on top of it. But it's just, again, having these conversations, taking that step forward. The fact that it's starting to improve in terms of women in construction in these industries, and it's, I guess, if we look back 5-10 years, it really has gone a long way. So it's fantastic to see that, but there's sort of no amount of work that's enough. So I might go back to John here. You're on the ground in construction quite a lot. What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Well, it's interesting, heralding back to what Martin said before. I can feel there's so much pressure in the industry, pressure to get projects completed, pressure on when tendering processes are being done, and it is so tightly competitive that I think that one of the things I'm seeing is that there is so much of that pressure driving completion of stages of projects and those sorts of things, where the safety guys have got so much responsibility that's almost they're overwhelmed, and they're not really getting enough time and space to deliver everything they want to deliver to their teams in an educational setting. I also think that one of the things that changed out of COVID, and this is just feedback I'm getting from the industry, is that because of the shutdowns or the lockdowns, etc., and not being able to pull people together into groups for educational sessions, and the fact that construction workers don't sit in front of computers, there's a backlog in technical training, and so this possibility of getting work groups together for educational sessions, they're finding it really, really difficult. So I think that's one of the, I suppose, the hangovers of the pandemic that sort of hasn't really resolved itself yet. But in all of my conversations with the safety guys, the thing that I'm hearing from them is that they're just overwhelmed. They've just got so much responsibility, and it's like they're struggling to be proactive, I suppose, is the feeling that I'm getting.
Great answer. And yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult thing. And the point there that, with how so many of the construction, well, a lot of it's remote. How do you get this information across to everyone, and how do you run these educational programs? It's a difficult thing. So, Martin, I might hand that to you. Sorry, John. No, John, you keep going. Yep.
I mean, a really interesting case in point. There's a construction company in Western Australia that wanted me to go to several of their mines to deliver some talks on mental health and wellbeing, pretty broad. And I was taking Matthew Richardson with me, and which was pretty exciting for the company, and it was all set. But they couldn't get the project managers on the sites to give the workforce 90 minutes off work to attend sessions, so the program got cancelled. And I imagine some of those workers, if they knew what they were missing out on, they'd be pretty upset. But that's the battle that is being had.
Yeah. How do you work around that? So yeah, Martin, what's your view on what are some of the strategies of how we can get this information across to the broader company and to these construction workers, and dealing with people being in, on different sites and remote? How can we get around that?
Well, it's a complex problem that we're trying to solve here. And I think, and Lisa mentioned it earlier about how you destigmatise the conversation around mental health. I think the industry's moved massively in the right direction on this now. It's openly talked about, there's the light's being shone in the corner, and people now are no longer feeling concerned about talking openly, provided that the environment's, a safe one in which to do that they share their experiences. And that's been a really positive shift, I think, for the industry now at the grassroots level, at projects now. You go to any construction project, large one now, across most of the tier ones, and there's all the signs and symbols around the project that it's okay to talk about it, and lots of resources available to enable that to happen. Then I think so. That's a really positive thing. And then the how do you build awareness? How do you maintain that momentum or build that momentum is challenging, because you need to take what we're doing in John Holland is actually taking a multi-pronged approach, so multiple channels of communication. So one of the things is to keep talking about it, so to establish the channels for people to interact. So it could be something quite simple like Workplace, which is Facebook. for industry for organisations. So we have that as a channel for people to connect in with each other on various topics, and that's not defined by role or where you sit in the organisation. It's whether you've got the app loaded onto your phone and you can share information as you see fit. So there's a communication channel for that. We do as I mentioned earlier, we do the leaders training with the Black Dog, and we do an induction as you come into the organisation. We also position well-being as a really important issue to focus on organisationally. So we have a set of what we call our global mandatory requirements, which are, most companies have them, and it establishes, what you do to manage high-risk hazards in the workplace. So whether it be working at height, confined space. So you specify critical controls that are standardised across the business. We took the step several years ago to include wellbeing as an area of fatal and non-permanent disabling injury because of the statistics in our industry. So we have a wellbeing standard that codifies the minimum requirements, much the same as if you're working at height or excavating and trenching or working with live electricity. These are the critical controls. So we've now incorporated that as a really important issue that the organisation needs to tackle. So symbolically, that's really important. But also we've then got procedures that cascade from that performance standard. We have a whole team of mental health first aiders in the business that we mobilised over the last few years to act as connectors. With people that want to talk about mental health or their own personal issues around mental health. So we've got trained people in the organisation. We've got to continue to, and we have an EAP as well, which is there to support people who, as a last line of defence for people that, also for prevention as well, but for people that do want to reach out in times of concern to talk to a qualified counsellor, etc. We're always looking at ways in which to keep the message fresh and keep the message alive. So we've been trialling some machine learning and artificial intelligence technology around training in our organisation. We haven't yet moved to doing this in the mental health and wellbeing space, but we've been doing it with technical based training. Working at height, heavy vehicle national law, we're doing confined space, working with electricity, drug and alcohol, those sorts of things. So we've had some remarkable results through a relationship we've got with a company called Area 9 in Denmark, where they provide AI technology to the healthcare sector and other highly regulated industries where you've got to prove competency. Independently, you've got to prove competency. So we're the first construction company globally to trial that technology, and we trialled it about 3 or 4 years ago. In 2020, we ran a trial, which was really successful. So now all our technical training from a health and safety point of view is done through AI, through this database. And what we've been able to discover is, because we can never verify that people understand the content going into training, we've never been able to assess competency coming out of the training. So now through this technology, we can assess people's level of understanding going in and that they come out with 100% competency. And we've reduced training time in classroom training time by 50%. But we've saved about 14,000 hours in 12 months through this training technology. So we're turning our mind now to whether it does require a level of technical understanding, computer literacy, so it may not be suitable for everybody. But we're looking at a way, this is a channel of sending the health and wellbeing messages into our business as well to get deeper understanding of content. And so we're going to be looking at that in further detail later. The other thing, just finally on this topic, one of the things that is really helpful to enhance the work that's being done across multiple sectors, particularly construction, is these new psychosocial regulations that have come in. Because the psychosocial regulations that have come in are putting additional responsibilities on employers to manage the risks that are driving poor mental health outcomes. So we now have a positive duty to identify the things that we've all been talking about, like job demands, long working hours, job design, leadership, etc., etc. We've now got a positive duty to identify those psychosocial hazards and have risk management plans in place to deal with them. So I think, optimistically, I think these regulations are going to accelerate the slow followers, if you like, that are slow to do anything structurally or significant within their business. I think these regulations will give them a push along. So it's quite timely that they're coming into effect.
Thank you so much for sharing it again. I think it really highlights, the detail that you guys are going into to try, and the levels that you're trying to push this, these initiatives, because a lot of companies will just take the Band-Aid solution or do what, the bare minimum and, tick a box. But, you're highlighting again, going above and beyond. And I think it's a message that everyone in this industry and broader needs to hear. So, thank you again for sharing that.
There are, Nick, can I just say, there are definite business and productivity benefits of all the things that we need to do in this area. So it's not, it shouldn't be seen just purely as an employee well-being proposition. There are, definite benefits to an organisation from investing in people to support them better. And I think that message is slowly getting through.
Yeah, it's taking that preventative approach and taking, maybe one step backwards to go 5 steps forwards by investing in the people, in the infrastructure, and in these programs. So I think, really, really good point. Lisa, what was your experience being at Lendlease through the pandemic and coming back from that? What have you seen? Have you seen things bounce back?
Yeah, I was actually working on hospital projects through the pandemic. So if anything, my sites got busier when the construction rules went in, because we were still critical infrastructure. So if anything, the pressure on site increased for us, whereas some sites were doing the juggling act of the 25%. I think during that time, it really highlighted to everyone what external pressures can mean when you're at work. Even just people's approach to work during COVID, they'd be frustrated by whatever new rules come out or not being able to do anything on the weekend. And I think that built on site. It was really kind of changed everyone's attitude to work. Some people I'd worked with for years would be more stressed than normal or would just be more grumpy and harder to work with. So I think during that time it had a real impact. But I think the positive from COVID, sort of what I was talking about before, is that because everyone was going through such a tough time then, people started talking about how much they were struggling with their not being able to see friends and family, or how hard it was not being able to even go out and play golf or whatever it is that they like to do as their sort of personal thing on the weekends. So I think that's ended up being a good thing to come out of COVID. Obviously, COVID's not a good thing, but that's one sort of positive that has come out of it. And that's then been able to sort of slowly build and kind of a little bit just simmer away in the background. But it meant that people are a little bit more comfortable, and people had to sit back and take the time to understand what was important to them or what they like doing, what sort of fills up their cup to make them happier outside of work, which then will relate to in work. And then, as you say, Martin, when people are well, I guess, have good mental health, are looking after themselves, that's when they're going to perform better as well. So that's when you see less mistakes happening on site, or that's when you see a better output. You know what it feels like when you're in the zone and you're getting work done and you get something that you're like, oh, that was actually easier than I thought it was going to be, or I've done that really well. But if you're tired and you're stressed or you're worried about other things on the weekend, that's when everything just feels harder. So there's definitely that link to understanding what's better for you, and then that'll improve your outputs at work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that one. And same question to you, Angelina. What was your experience in your organisation with COVID and the recovery from that? What did you see there?
We saw lots. We pulse checked our members at the start of COVID, right up until now. So we've had 8 pulse check surveys. And I'll just give you sort of a high level. The profession was slammed. I mean, from project cancellations, projects being put on hold, or the anticipation of both. It had a ripple effect in terms of that widespread concern of the pipeline of work and where do we go from here, which then had a big toll on practice directors, the firms. As an employer body, our role is to support them. But, you're seeing practices around making staff reductions, standing employees down, cutting hours, considering redundancies, all of which had a huge toll on employers itself. Having said that, it was an opportunity for the ACA to really step up and take the reins around mental wellbeing. And so the development and the launch and the rollout of our Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum was a huge positive in that sense. And we were able to bring practices together and really try and address some of the key issues. So burnout, fatigue, exhaustion, these were the things that we were seeing. And we were able to talk a lot more about the long hours culture, clients and how client behaviour was driving a lot of outcomes in terms of well-being. So it gave us an opportunity to really revisit our strategy as an organisation, as a representative body, and develop programs such as the Stepping Up program, as I mentioned, in conjunction with Champions of Change and Parla, to highlight these issues. So if anything, there would be ebbs and flows in terms of well-being across employers and employees, but we were able to actually talk about these issues a lot more and get buy-in from our practices. So that's been positive in many ways. But I also want to acknowledge too that we're seeing a lot of inequity in terms of accessing mental health services, particularly for disadvantaged, marginalised groups, those in lower income communities, rural areas. And I think that's a big challenge, and a challenge also for a country, that's made up of a significant portion of migrants, myself included, where you've got this cultural and societal attitudes towards mental health and well-being, which vary depending on your culture, your race, your region, your demographic. So it's not that easy to tackle because, it's a conversation that we might be having quite openly in one segment of our profession, but maybe not. So I think for us, it's also about making sure that we are inclusive around the campaigns and the language and what it is that we're trying to achieve. And I just think it's important to also kind of integrate that aspect to all of our initiatives because, we're all trying to do the right thing, but at the same time, we've just got to be cognizant of that inclusivity and equity piece.
Yeah, great answer. And I love the comment you're making there about trying to, find a positive out of it, use that time during COVID to explore another area. And I think it's just such a great message because we can always find, the positive in whatever the situation is if we want to. It's easier to bury your head in the sand, but, we can find that. So I'm going to finish this. I've had 3 of the 4 of you. Lisa, you're the only one who hasn't been on the podcast, so I might have to get you on soon as well. But as the rest of you know, I finish every episode with 5 closing questions. So because including me, there's 5, I'll answer one as well, and I'll do one each. Before we go into that, does anyone have any final comments they want to make? Feel free.
Yeah, I'd like to just add one thing. Sorry, John.
Go for it.
I'll be quick. I think it's important that it has a leadership aspect around it. I know from my company, just during COVID, Andrew Miller was one of our senior construction managers who was across his 4 or 5 projects, and he actively promoted. He reached out to you, Nick, the Move Your Mind, and made sure that everyone attended that session, and he was really promoting it, saying, there's so much pressure we're all experiencing at work, but it's okay to just stop for an hour and engage in this. And I think that's really important, that got people to just stop and go, okay, yes, our industry is crazy busy, crazy pressures, but it's okay to take this hour. Unfortunately for John over in WA, they didn't have someone with strong leadership in that position to encourage it, but I think that's really important to have that leadership both from the appointed leaders and then other people in the business to say it's okay to just pause for a minute and think here. So.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that.
I was just going to add, in my role as global chair of the workplace wellbeing initiative at the Global Wellness Institute, one of the things we noticed early on in the pandemic is that big companies across the world were just appointing chief wellbeing officers. And it's funny, there's no university degree to give you a qualification for that. So there's a lot of learning by doing it. I love how Martin's described how John Holland's put wellbeing people in as many positions as they can. And that's been a big part of the focus now, is to educate people who are, because what has happened is wellbeing has just been thrown to the safety guys or thrown to the HR people. It's like, take care of that. It's a bit of a hot potato because there's a lack of skills. So I think there's a real need there for education in those areas to help build the skills of those people in those key leadership roles to have more of an understanding of wellbeing in a broader sense.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that one as well. So if no one else has any other comments, and sorry, Lisa, you mentioned Andrew Miller there, so big shout out to him as well. He's a great guy. I've known him for a number of years as well. So if he's listening, hi Andrew. So we'll jump into these. So first one of these is I'm going to answer this one. So best childhood memory is the first question I ask at the end of these interviews. So. For me, my best childhood memory would be, we've got a holiday house at Wye River, and I've had that since before I was born, and would go down there, every few weekends. And my best memory would be just, with the family driving along the Great Ocean Road, going down there. It was an amazing memory, and very lucky to, grow up in Australia and have access to, that kind of thing. So that would be, for me, my best childhood memory. So next one, I might give this one to you, Martin. What do you think is currently the biggest issue on mental health in society? Or one of the biggest?
Yeah, look, I would think that I think the biggest issue is that there's a lack of funding at the government level around mental health, and that funding being available for really important programs and activities. I think that there's certainly been some changes in that area over the years, but I think that there still needs to be more work. There needs to be more funds made available for grassroots programs to address these issues. But I think certainly at the policy setting, we're heading in the right direction. But how that actually cuts through into communities, I think that needs to be addressed. I also I think that there's lots of contributing factors at the community level around mental health which are linked directly to disadvantage, and I think that needs to be more properly resourced. Things that are driving poor mental health outcome beyond the construction industry, I think is represented a lot in disadvantaged communities.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. John, I'll give this one to you. What's your personal definition of happiness?
Well, in this moment, I would say it's just liking yourself. And I think that comes from being in charge of your own life and making your own decisions and honouring your agreements, and keeping your slate clean. And I think that when we do those things and we give the best of ourselves in life, we like who we are. And I think it's when we do things that take us away from that are perhaps a little bit self-degrading, that have us not like who we are. So I think happiness is really very closely associated with just liking yourself.
Great answer. And yeah, I think it's if you can like yourself and be comfortable with yourself, then life becomes a lot more simple. Not an easy thing to do, but a very important one. So love that answer. Lisa, I've got a bit of a different one here for you. What are you most afraid of?
Ooh, okay, that's a good question. I think I'm most afraid of not being accepted. and that's taken a lot of time for me to work through, and I think I'm getting better with that afraidness, I guess. I think initially it was very apprehensive about not fitting in or not being welcome somewhere or not fitting a mould. But I think that's been a personal journey of mine to, I guess, come to terms with that scared part of me. But yeah, that's what I've been most afraid of. But I guess I'm proud to say I'm getting better at that, and I'm getting more okay with being me, and that's okay.
Well, thank you for being open and sharing that. Yeah, it's a great answer. Really appreciate that. Angelina, last one here. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I'm going to say my family, because I'm really proud of them. I have an amazing husband who, by the way, his birthday today. So a shout out to Davie. We've been together.
Happy birthday to your husband! Yeah.
We've been together for over 33 years actually. We've got two legendary sons. 21 and 19, and just. For me, I think I'm really proud of that. When I came to Australia as an international student 33 years ago, he was sort of the first one I met, and together we've kind of grown up here in Australia, made Australia our home. We've been through ups and downs, and I just think that respect and that mutual respect and love and admiration and support for each other. COVID hasn't been great on lots of people, but just having that network, I think, and support from this family has been something I'm really proud of, and being part of this mob.
Great answer, and yeah, happy birthday again to your husband, and congratulations. That's amazing having that long of a marriage. It's incredible. So thank you to everyone, to Angelina, Lisa, Martin, John. Thank you so much for volunteering this time to come on here. You're all doing incredible work in this industry in different ways, and I've really appreciated being able to get to know all of you, and Lisa, hopefully I can get to know you as well. And again, it's I think you've all contributed really valuable information today that will help a lot of people. So thank you again for making the time.
Thank you, Nick. And I just want to shout out to your initiative around these conversations. They've just opened up, shone a light, and it's been really spectacular, stunning effort. So thank you to you and your team.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Bye. Have a great day. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you so much to Angelina Pillai, John Toomey, Lisa Davie, and Martin Smith for joining me today on Brick by Brick.